My name is Anna Castillo. Thank you for tuning into my presentation for my research proposal titled The Impact of Charter Schools on Low-Performing Students, a Teacher and Parent Perspective. The purpose of this study was to identify and examine the common themes among the perceptions that teachers and parents have on how Cleveland charter schools impact the academic achievement of low-performing students in grades K through 8. In addition to the main purpose of this study, I hope to obtain possible reasons why low-performing students choose to leave charters and to identify some of the subtle ways in which charters might dissuade low-performing students from enrolling and or pushing them out before testing begins. Literature review. After reviewing the literature, charter studies which have examined the effectiveness of charter schools have produced mixed results. For instance, the effectiveness of charters seem to vary from one school to another, as well as the negative or positive factors that are contributing to the academic success or failure of each charter. Most charter school studies have focused primarily on high-stakes testing data to indicate the effectiveness of charter schools on student progress, but few have focused on the common factors that can contribute to student success and or failure in charters. I also found that there are concerns of charter schools pushing low-performing students out and of cream skimming, which is when charters select students with better academic profiles. Some limitations that I found in the literature were because the studies produce mixed results, it is difficult to generalize the findings across charter schools. Another limitation was the complexity in obtaining reasons why low-performing students transfer or leave charter schools, and in identifying attempts of cream skimming or pushing students out by charters because they tend to be subtle. Most lottery-based studies have found that charters with lottery-based admissions have a positive impact on disadvantaged students. In the following Clark, Gleason, Tuttle, and Silverberg study, they found that middle school charter schools with lottery admissions served the more disadvantaged students in urban areas and had a more positive impact than the middle school charters, which served the more advantaged students in non-urban areas. So their studies seem to agree with other lottery-based studies. In the next study by Zimmer and Budden, they examined the operation and organizational structures of charters, and they looked in particular at school organizational features, school-level control, teacher quality issues, curriculum allocations, and principal backgrounds. They looked at these 5 factors, and after studying them, they concluded that they had no significant effect on student performance. And they also looked at greater school autonomy for charter schools. This is something that charter schools like to promote, that they have greater autonomy than public schools. But Zimmer and Budden were able to show that having greater school autonomy had no improvement in test scores of students. In the next study by Zimmer and Guarino, they tried to determine whether there was empirical evidence to show that charter schools were actually pushing out low-performing students, because charter schools seem to have a greater annual yearly progress of 65% versus the public schools, which had an annual yearly progress of 45%. They relied on accountability testing scores to determine whether they were actually being pushed out. But they concluded that low-performing students in charters were transferring out at the same rate as low-performing students in typical public schools. So it was pretty much the same for both charters and public schools. The study had one limitation, and that was that it did not provide reasons behind the transfers that were taking place. So they weren't able to determine why the students were actually transferring out. In Bancroft's ethnographic study, which was a year-long study. Teachers and students were observed, and 75 teachers were interviewed. And the charters that were involved in this study were unable to meet the student needs and were unable to provide professional development for the teachers to help meet the needs of the students. They also lacked financial means, which also contributed to the fact that they were unable to meet student needs. Because they were unable to meet the students' needs, they began to rely on a selective approach, which is cream skimming, to be able to select better students to enroll in the school and to eventually help the future academic and financial success of the school. In the next study is the Drayman-Frattura study, which used a participatory evaluation process, which is a type of evaluation process that charter schools utilize to evaluate how well they are meeting the needs of struggling students in the school. In the study, they concluded that many of the efforts that the charter schools were doing to help struggling students was actually working against the needs of struggling students, and they lacked an individual support for students who were struggling. They also lacked teacher knowledge and professional development to help with the varying student needs in these charter schools that participated in this study. The rationale for the research stems from the fact that studies on charter schools have produced mixed results. So it's been difficult to be able to generalize any specific contributing factors to student achievement. And there are also, the studies haven't been able to produce reasons why low-performing students transfer or leave charter schools. And any attempts on trying to see identify schools when there's cream skimming or pushing students out by charters is also a difficult thing for many studies to be able to obtain. I also think we need to obtain more teacher and parent perspectives in regards to charter school effectiveness. When looking at teacher and parent perspectives, I want to be able to further explore the impact of charters on raising student achievement of low-performing students, and to provide additional and valuable insight to the charter school debate, and to also lead to hopefully have it lead to further investigative inquiry. There are 3 research questions I will pursue in this study. The first one is, what are the perceptions of teachers and parents on how charter schools impact the academic achievement of low-performing students? Second one, what do teachers and parents identify as common challenges charter schools experience when educating low-performing students? Third question, what do teachers and parents recognize as effective or ineffective ways in which charter schools help the specific needs of low-performing students? Some additional questions I hope to be able to answer are, what do teachers and parents perceive as the reasons why low-performing students leave or transfer out of charters? And have teachers or parents witnessed or experienced low-performing students being pushed out of charters? If yes, what were the reasons? For this study, I will use a qualitative research approach with a phenomenology design, which will allow me to obtain a deeper meaning and understanding of the participants' opinions, their experiences, and perspectives on the issues under investigation. The sampling for this study was a purposive sampling, and it included general and special education teachers from grades K through 8th, and parents of low-performing students in grades K through 8th. And these students, low-performing students, would be students who would be identified as low performing by their teachers in order to be able to, the parents would be able to participate in the study. And the instruments used in this study were individual teacher and parent interviews, and that would be conducted by the researcher, and also notes that would be taken by the researcher during their interviews would be used. For the procedures of this study, first I will need to get approval of the Institutional Review Board from Cleveland State because I will have human subjects in the study. I first need to get the approval. Once I have the approval, then I will be able to send out letters containing the information about the study and procedures to all K through 8th Cleveland charter schools. Once I have received confirmation on the schools that want to participate, I will then select a minimum of 5 teachers and 5 parents from each school for individual interviews in the respective locations. So after I have the teachers' names and parents, I will then schedule teacher and parent interviews at each school location, following an interview protocol for each interview session. For the interviews, they will follow a standardized open list of 5 questions, while the researcher will be able to take notes and audio tape each session. Participants will be reminded at all times that their information will be anonymous and confidential throughout the study. Once the interviews have been completed, the transcriptions of the audio taped interviews along with the interviewers' written notes will be analyzed and coded, and then once that is done, the information will be used to be able to describe and discuss common themes that are found throughout the data. Once the common themes have been identified, then possible reasons will be presented for why low-performing students transfer, and also possible reasons for the selective approach for enrollment that might be used by some charters can be explained. And also with the data that is collected, comparisons will be made between the parents and the teacher responses, along with comparing the data results with other findings from other studies. Because the study follows a phenomenology design, the potential for limitations may arise in the validity and the reliability due to bias that can occur in the study. During the individual interviews, there can be interview bias, and that can sometimes be caused just by the presence of the interviewer. It can cause the participants to respond in a favorable way for the study, which can bias the results. And sometimes some of the participants may not be able to express their ideas as well as others. Qualitative studies have been criticized for their validity, their reliability, and their generalizability of their findings because they tend to rely on the perspectives and the perceptions of their participants, and also on the researchers' perceptions. So that can also lead to research bias. But I think it's very important, even with these limitations, that qualitative studies can produce valuable information that can help the future direction, especially in this case with charter studies. It could lead them into new directions to be able to study new, focus in new areas that have not been focused on before. This concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time.